John Kennedy disguises himself as homeless to test a bank. You won't believe what happens at the end. John Kennedy, the U.S. Senator from Louisiana, a man renowned for his sharp intellect and steadfast principles, shuffled down the palm-lined avenues of Beverly Hills, disguised as a homeless man. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the city, where wealth and glamour were woven into its very essence. Sleek Bentleys and Lamborghinis gleamed along pristine sidewalks, their polished surfaces reflecting a world where luxury was not just a lifestyle but a way of life. Kennedy's shoes were worn, the soles nearly gone. His pants were frayed at the edges, patched and faded, and his threadbare jacket hung loosely on his wiry frame, stained with the wear of countless days. Yet beneath this disheveled exterior, there was a quiet confidence in his step, a subtle strength that seemed to defy the judgment of the world around him. He had meticulously crafted his appearance. A scruffy beard, a faded baseball cap pulled low over his brow, and clothes that looked like they'd seen better decades. His mission was bold yet simple, to step into the shoes of those society often ignored, and test the humanity of one of Beverly Hills' most prestigious institutions, First Summit Bank. As he approached the bank's gleaming glass facade, its reflective surface catching the brilliance of the California sun, Kennedy felt a surge of anticipation. His heart beat steadily, driven not by fear, but by a deep curiosity to uncover the truth hidden beneath the polished veneer of wealth. Inside the bank's interior was a monument to extravagance. Polished marble floors stretched like a glassy sea, and vaulted ceilings adorned with intricate designs spoke of the institution's grandeur. Clients in tailored suits and designer dresses lounged in plush leather chairs, sipping complimentary espresso as sharply dressed bankers attended to their every need. The air hummed with the quiet confidence of wealth, soft conversations, the clink of gold watches, the rustle of crisp documents. But the moment Kennedy stepped through the glass doors, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations faltered. Eyes darted his way, some curious others laced with disdain. A few clients exchanged hushed whispers, their words inaudible, but their meaning clear. Kennedy felt the weight of their judgment, the unspoken assumptions about his worth or lack thereof. Yet he remained composed, his focus razor-sharp, his purpose unwavering. He approached the reception desk where a woman in her 40s stood, her perfectly styled hair and crisp blazer, a stark contrast to his ragged appearance. Her name tag read Marilyn, and her expression, though professional, barely masked her contempt. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice flat, her eyes scanning him from head to toe as if assessing his inadequacy. "Yes," Kennedy replied, his tone calm but deliberate, his southern drawl softened to blend into his disguise. "I'd like to open a basic checking account." Marilyn blinked clearly, taken aback by the request. For a moment, her polished facade slipped, revealing a flicker of surprise before she recovered with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Our minimum deposit for opening an account is $500, she said, enunciating each word as though speaking to someone who might struggle to comprehend. "Do you have the necessary funds with you today?" Kennedy reached into his pocket, his movements slow and intentional, and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. He smoothed it out on the counter, the faded currency looking almost absurd against the gleaming marble. "I have this," he said simply, meeting her gaze without flinching. Marilyn's lips twitched a condescending laugh, escaping before she could stifle it. "I'm afraid that won't be enough," she said, her tone dripping with dismissal. "Perhaps you should try a different institution, one more suited to your circumstances." The words landed sharply, not because they surprised Kennedy he had anticipated this, but because of how effortlessly they were delivered, as though rejecting someone like him was routine. Around the room, the bank's quiet hum continued, but Kennedy noticed the smirks and glances from other staff and clients. A man in a pinstriped suit muttered something to his companion, who chuckled softly. A young banker at a nearby desk averted his eyes, pretending to focus on his computer. The air was thick with judgment, and Kennedy felt a quiet sorrow, not for himself, but for the countless others who faced this kind of treatment daily. His eyes scanned the room, landing on a young woman seated at a desk near the back. She couldn't have been older than her mid-20s, her name tag reading Clara. Unlike the others, her expression wasn't one of disdain. Her eyes held a mix of curiosity and unease, as though she were grappling with an internal struggle. Kennedy noted her face, sensing a spark of humanity in a place that seemed to have forgotten it. Marilyn's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Sir," she said, her tone sharper now, "if you don't have the required funds, I'll have to ask you to leave." She pressed a button on her desk, and a security guard approached, his posture imposing but his expression neutral. "Is there a problem here?" the guard asked, his voice firm but not hostile. Kennedy shook his head, his mind racing. He had come to test the boundaries of perception, to see how a place like First Summit Bank treated those who didn't fit its mold of wealth and privilege. The results were disheartening, but not unexpected. "No problem," he said quietly, turning toward the door. But before he left, he cast one last glance at Clara. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, and in that brief exchange, he saw something. Perhaps an apology. Perhaps a flicker of defiance. It was enough to spark a glimmer of hope. Outside, the sun blazed on, but Kennedy's thoughts were stormy. The world he navigated as a senator, a world of influence and respect, felt distant from the reality he had just experienced. His experiment had only begun, but it was already exposing the stark divide between privilege and exclusion. He settled on a park bench across the street, watching the bank's glass doors swing open and shut as clients came and went, their polished appearances a sharp contrast to his tattered disguise. His mind drifted to Clara, the young woman whose discomfort had stood out amid the indifference. Who was she? Would she be bold enough to challenge the rigid culture of the bank? Kennedy didn't know, but he felt certain their paths would cross. Again. Inside the bank, Clara sat at her desk, her hands trembling slightly as she sorted through paperwork. The encounter with the man at the counter lingered in her mind. He had been calm, dignified despite the rejection, and it unsettled her. Marilyn and the other staff had already moved on, dismissing the incident with laughter. "Can you believe that guy?" Marilyn said to a colleague, her voice carrying across the room, thinking he could open an account with $20. Her colleague smirked, adding, "I'm surprised he didn't try to pay with loose change." Clara bit her lip, forcing herself to stay silent. Their mockery grated on her not just because it was cruel, but because it clashed with the values she held dear, treating everyone with dignity, no matter their circumstances. She had joined the bank, hoping to make a difference. But the reality of First Summit was far different. It was a place where wealth dictated worth, and appearances trumped humanity. As the day dragged on, Clara's thoughts kept returning to the man. Why had he chosen their bank? There were other places, credit unions, community banks, that might have treated him with more respect. And why had she done nothing to help? The guilt gnawed at her, a reminder of the gap between who she wanted to be and who she had been in that moment. During her lunch break, she stepped outside, hoping the fresh air would clear her mind. She wandered toward the park across the street, her gaze scanning the area almost unconsciously. Then she saw him, the same disheveled figure seated on a bench, his posture relaxed, but his eyes alert as he watched the world go by. Her heart skipped a beat. She hesitated, glancing back at the bank's towering facade, a symbol of the rules she was expected to follow. But something inside her pushed her forward. Taking a deep breath, Clara approached the bench, her steps tentative. "Excuse me," she said softly, stopping a few feet away. Kennedy looked up, his expression neutral but curious. I wanted to apologize for what happened in there, she said, her voice trembling slightly. It wasn't right the way you were treated. Kennedy studied her for a moment, his sharp eyes taking in her sincerity. You work there, don't you? He asked, nodding toward the bank. Clara nodded, her cheeks flushing. Yes, but I'm just a trainee. I don't have much say in how things are run. Kennedy's lips curved into a faint smile. But you came out here anyway, he said, his tone thoughtful. That says something. Clara shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. I guess I just wanted to say that not everyone there thinks the way they do, she said finally. I don't know if it matters, but I think everyone deserves a chance no matter what they look like. It matters, Kennedy said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made Clara pause. He gestured to the empty spot on the bench beside him. Why don't you sit for a minute? Clara hesitated, glancing back at the bank, but something about his calm demeanor reassured her. She sat down, her nerves easing slightly. They sat in silence for a moment before Kennedy spoke again. Why do you work there? He asked, his tone casual but probing. Clara blinked, surprised by the question. I've always wanted to work in finance, she said, choosing her words carefully. I thought it would be a way to help people, to make a difference.